So yesterday we went over,
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you make your screen just a little bit bigger? Thank you.
like that. So yesterday we talked about HTTP. We first talked about certain protocols that govern internet interaction between different parties. So we mentioned IP, which is the internet protocol, and that is concerned with where the server or the computer is, and it has a few different forms, I mean, a few different versions. And we talked about TCP, which is concerned with how the data is getting to where it needs to be. And that usually includes a three-way handshake and just it just lays out how data is going from one place to another. HTTP, on the other hand, is the actual components of the data that is being sent. So when we put a request in our domain, in our URL, when we put a domain in our URL, a request gets put together and it is formatted in a certain way. And usually those formats are human readable. So we have a request and then the server ends up sending us a response in return. We also talked about, only briefly, APIs, which stand for Application Programming Interface. And an API is essentially a contract between two pieces of software that determines how they interact with each other. So libraries that we use with Python or JavaScript, whatever libraries we use, those have an API. It has certain methods that you're allowed to use, and those methods then give you certain functionality or certain data. Yeah, we'll talk more about different types of APIs. There are, I think, so web APIs, REST APIs, HTTP APIs, all of these are pretty much synonymous. And it's just a method for us to get data that is predetermined, pretty much. There's a predetermined way to access this data, and you will use this predetermined way to get the data that you need or get the functionality that you need. And today specifically, we'll be using JSON APIs. So it will let our front end request data from someone else's database. And I also showed you guys, there are many free public APIs. I'm going to show it one more time. Oops. So this GitHub one, I don't know how comprehensive this list is. There are many more out there. But the thing to note is these three columns. So authentication is whether or not this API requires you to authenticate yourself in some way. So we'll learn more about authentication, I think, in a few lectures. Shouldn't be too far away. But basically, you can either authenticate using an API key, which you sign up on their website and they give you a key and they're like, okay, I know who you are now. So take this key and whenever you want to grab data from us, use this key and we will be able to identify you. And some other places have something called OAuth, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, so what do you guys think the benefits of having this authentication would be?
I mean, why would we insulate it from exposure or the API idea?
Insulated from exposure, and then I missed the last part.
Yeah, I don't, well, I mean, you certainly there's certain, we all have data we want to secure.
Mhm.
So maybe I
Yeah.
didn't understand your question.
Kind of. So they want, it's a public API, so they want people to be able to access this data. But a reason why they would have authentication is to be able to kind of hold people accountable for if they do something that is not good. So like if you're making, I don't know, 1,000 requests every second, and that's too much for their servers to handle, they can block you. They can block your API key, or they can block your authentication. They could just stop you from continuing on that. So it's pretty much to control bad behavior and minimize the amount of things that they have to deal with. And sometimes it's just because they want to take money. So sometimes you have to sign up and have to pay to get access to APIs. HTTPS, all of them should, or most of them, yeah, should be accessible through HTTPS. So this is just if they're using a secure protocol. Some of them are still on HTTP, which is fine, but it's not the industry standard. CORS stands for cross-origin resource sharing, I think. This we'll also talk about later, but for our purposes right now, when we're playing around with these APIs, like today and maybe tomorrow. So when we're accessing it from the front end, we can only really access the ones that say CORS no. So it's a certain policy on, I believe on browsers that blocks certain access points. You have to like do a setting. We'll learn about it more. But for now, whenever you're finding an API to play around with and work with, you can start with authentication no, and then CORS no. And then you can play around with API keys and OAuth to challenge yourself a little bit. It's not too difficult. Okay. Any questions on APIs? On like these things here? So let's say we mentioned the Pokemon API, right? So it's also in here. There's another one here, Poke API. So if you click on the website, it usually takes you to the documentation of the APIs. Some of these APIs have better documentation than others. So this one gives you like URL and what to put in and allows you to test it out here in the browser. Some APIs are, I actually don't know of. Yeah, so this one also has some documentation. Some APIs are worse than others, and you will find very little documentation, and you don't really know what you're allowed to access or what resources you can get. So you will probably run into those. But yeah, so this is just a cool resource to have. Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is called Ajax. So there are many ways to send HTTP requests. And these ways are like clicking a link or submitting a form or just typing a URL into your browser. Those all trigger HTTP requests. So, but the problem is that a lot of those methods will actually unload your page and then reload it with the new data. And we want a way to, go around that. And it's not really helpful if you are, I don't know, you load your page and then you have to get some extra data and then your page reloads and like stuff gets messed up. So the way that we can get around that is through a mechanism called Ajax, and this stands for asynchronous. I forgot how to spell asynchronous. I think that's correct. JavaScript and XML. Okay. So the most important part here is the asynchronous JavaScript. Synchronous means that things are running in succession, and then asynchronous is that means that multiple things are running at the same time. So you're able to have a process run in the background without having to interrupt your current process, which is ideal in a lot of situations. So this allows us to build a more elegant, modern application. And we, so yeah, we talked about the asynchronous JavaScript part. The XML part, so previously it used to send the XML data or use XML data. XML has a similar syntax to HTML, but nowadays no one really uses XML, and instead we send back, or we get back JSON data. Does anyone know what JSON stands for?
JavaScript object notation.
JavaScript what?
I think it's object notation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what JSON looks like, looks like a library, a dictionary. So it would have like name, and then it would have something here, I don't know. And it could have data, and this data is going to be a list. Yeah, so this is basically what JSON data looks like. It's just a nested object, a JavaScript object. And so even though we use this instead of XML now, having the acronym be Ajax is a little weird. So they kept it as Ajax. It sounds cooler. So this technique of being able to make an HTTP request in the background and then receive data was made possible in 1999 when Microsoft made Internet Explorer. But the object was called HTTP or XML HTTP request, or XHR. So this is part of, you can actually see it in the browser. Let me show you. So if I go to my network tab, so here, here you can filter by type of request, and this XHR, this is the request that we're looking at. Nowadays, browsers call it fetch. So fetch is the new name that they're trying to go towards instead of XHR. And you can make calls asynchronously from the browser itself, just by calling fetch. And then actually haven't tried this out. Yes. I don't know if I have to put it in. Yeah, I haven't played around with the fetch part, but you're not going to be using fetch. We are going to be using a third-party library, which makes things easier and gives us some more functionality. And this library is called Ajax. Sorry, Axios. So Axios is a pretty powerful library, and it's a very popular modern HTTP client for JavaScript. So let's try actually seeing some code today. So I just created a basic HTML file. Let me just remove this real quick. Okay. And so this just takes in an index.js that I wrote, and this just console logs hello there. I believe my terminal was running. Let's see. Oh, it might be. Yeah, there we go. So I just started the server, as we've seen usually. So now if I go to my local host at 8,000, I refresh, I see my hello there. Okay. So we need to install Axios. We need to grab it from somewhere. So I'm just going to look up Axios CDN. So this is their documentation website, which is pretty useful. So yeah, I'm gonna grab this one and just copy it into my HTML file. Okay. We will talk more about other ways of installing it when we're working with React, because React has like a package manager, so you wouldn't actually have to do this in your HTML file, which is cool. But anyway, so now that I've loaded my script tag, I should have access to it here in my index.js. So what we have to do is say Axios dot, and Axios allows us to do a few different requests, but since we're grabbing data from a public API, we're most likely only going to be using get, or not only, but we are most likely going to be using get, because a lot of third-party data people don't want you to change their data, so they won't give you access to that. So you put get, and I'm going to grab the Pokemon API example. Let me just copy it from here. This is the same one as here, just easier to copy. And I put my URL in here. I just need to put it in quotes. And this is basically it. This is all I have to write to make that request. So we want to try to catch the information from here. So this get call will return, it usually takes a little bit of time to run. So I think it takes roughly around 100 milliseconds to run. So while so what do we do while we wait? We have to so this Axios library returns an object to you called a promise. This promise is, it's like a real world promise where, like, if you ask someone, could you get me a lemon? And they promise you that you'll get a lemon. You have the promise of a lemon, but you don't have the actual lemon yet. So to be able to access the promise, you would have to say .then. So I have my promise. So after this promise resolves, then I want to do something. So yeah, so this .then accepts a callback function. So inside here, I can actually put a new function that does what I need to do after this request gets resolved. And in here, we can send in the response. So the response gets sent into the function that is within the .then. So here we have access to our response, and then I'm just going to do a console log of my response. Okay. So now if I refresh, I have some data here, which is pretty cool. So there's quite a bit of information that was sent in. So here we can see our status was 200. That means it was successful. Status text, they didn't send anything, which is fine. This is the request information. You might not need many things from here. These are the headers that were sent and configuration. Not sure if you'll need too many of these either, but the main information that you will actually use is inside data. So let's see what was sent back. So I had made a request to Pokemon/Ditto. What it sent back is abilities, forms, game indices. So like these are two different abilities. Oops. This one and this one, two different abilities. For this Pokemon, I have all this information. So it's just like a nested object. And to grab the information, you have to parse through it. So I think it also has, there's moves, stats, oh, sprites. So sprites, it'll actually give you the picture of the Pokemon, which is cool. So if you just insert this into an image tag, you'd be able to see this little guy here. Okay. So how do we parse this? Let's say we want to print out so data, and then we want to say abilities. We want to print out the abilities. So so it's response.data dot abilities. I just want the first one, so I'll do it at 0. Which there's so many nested ones. So abilities, and then at 0, and then ability dot ability, and let's see what that prints out. There we go. It prints out the first ability. And a lot of times there are URLs. So these URLs you can take, and then you can do another Axios call from within them. So let's see what this URL does. It returns a lot of information around this ability. Let's choose a different data point that might be interesting to look at. Species, maybe. Let's see what species. Oh, also, if you want to just, like we said, the browser does HTTP requests. So these requests you can put into the browser and it'll send back just a dump of data. So you can, this is an easy way to test out your API. Okay, this is fine. So, oops. So this returns some information. Doesn't really matter what we're gonna get. So I want to get, I'll actually call this URL, never mind, because we already did the, okay. So I'm just gonna say ability equals this. And if we remember from what was printed out, we have a name and a URL in here. So I'm gonna say ability URL equals ability dot URL. Is it capital? No, it's not. Okay. And now I can do another call. But actually before that, So what happens if I make a wrong request? So let's say I sent in this, or I forgot the H in the HTTP. We get an error. So an uncaught error inside the promise. So we don't really want to have uncaught errors. We want to make sure that we catch them. Remember in Python, we did the try catch. So with this, so we have the dot then, but we also can chain onto that dot catch. And this dot catch will then do whatever whatever we tell it to do pretty much. So we can print out an extra error or something like that. So with this one, it's going to be also the same. It takes a callback function, and we can take in something called an error. And this is again just a name that we give it. So we take in an error, and we can console.log and error heard. Okay, so now if I mess this up again, I try running it, it just prints out an error occurred. We don't actually get an error, which is a pretty good practice. You don't want things to just break. You want to be able to handle it as elegantly as possible. Okay. So if we wanted to pretty much make another API call from this, it's going to be a little hard to chain on. So we can do another dot then here, and then send in another function. And here we would have to, oops, return our ability URL. And it would be sent into here. So URL, and then we can make another call. But this chaining gets very annoying if you have a lot of them, and it just makes it more complex. So let's write this function in a different way. So here, I remove just my terminal. So this is one way of writing an API call. Another way is to create a function. So I'm going to create a function called get Pokemon. And this function is just going to be this. And I have to say that this will be an async function, because we are going to use a word so there's async and await. So these two words are usually used together. So we define our function as an async function. And now to do our API call, so let me just copy this one. Because we did this, we can say, we can actually grab the response as a variable. So response equals, and how do we handle the fact that it's a promise and we have to wait for it? We just put await in front of the request. So what this does is when it gets to this line, it's going to pretty much halt this method and wait until the response comes back, and then it will put the response into this variable. Versus here, it was waiting until this is done, and then it went into the dot then and sent in the response as a variable or as a parameter, and then did whatever we wanted to do.
How do you change that? Is there a timeout value you can change when you're waiting for the response?
No, for this one, it just waits until it gives some response back, until it resolves. So with API calls, there are, or with HTTP requests, a request will either resolve or reject. So if it resolves, things went well. If it rejects, that means things didn't go too well, but it still is resolving to some resolution. So I guess maybe resolve is the general word, and then I'll think of the word later. But I hope you get the general gist of it. So let's recreate this one. So we have the response now, and I want to grab this information. I'm going to delete it from here. Okay, so ability, I grabbed the ability, and then I grabbed the ability URL. And now I want to do another call. So I can do constant ability response. Oops. Equals await. And then there's this. Actually, the URL is not going to be the base URL that we just called. It's going to be the URL that we got from the data. So I'm just going to send in ability URL. And then I'm going to print out the results. So log ability response. That should be sufficient. I'm going to comment this one out so we don't get too many logs printed. Okay. So now we are grabbing, so we're calling our base URL. So this is called, oops, in an API, this is called a base URL. So this is the base path that you will always have to access to get whatever information you want from this API. And then this stuff after it is just the resource, or I don't know, people name it different things. So yeah, we call this, we are awaiting its response, we get the response, and then from that response, we grab another URL. So it's kind of like chaining different calls. And then we grab that URL, and then we make another call, but using that URL instead, and then we're gonna print out the response. Nothing happened. Oh, can someone tell me why nothing happened?
Are you not returning anything?
We haven't called the function.
I have not called the function exactly.
That too.
Yep. I don't have to return anything here because I'm just printing. But yeah, I did not call function. Okay. Oops. There we go. We got some data, and this data is just information on the ability. Yeah, it's not that exciting, but yeah. Any questions about this?
So we're doing this for like a single Pokemon. In that parameter, could we like pass in an ID by the async, and then use string interpolation to like use the ID after Pokemon slash?
Yeah, definitely. So if we had a specific Pokemon ID,
I'm saying like pass it into the parameter.
Yep.
In the actual function.
Into here, you mean, like to
So
add it?
right after the async in the parentheses, like pass in, say ID.
Yeah, we can, yes, that would be.
And then
That would be
after the Pokemon, we can use like the $, open and close brackets.
Yeah, so we can do $, curly braces, and then just send in the ID.
Yeah,
We can also just do the, like, if it's a string, and then we can do a plus and then ID, and it'll just concatenate it. Sometimes it is a little weird with numbers and stuff like that, but yeah, let's try this. Let's see if our API actually does that. Okay, so it will return something. That's awesome. So let's just do that and then print. Oops. Do this response. And let's go back to our file. Okay, so our first response should be what we grabbed. And if we're not sure what request this is, we can see that this was the request that was made. So we called the API with the Pokemon with ID 4. And let's see. Okay, so we got Charmander back, which is pretty cool. Yeah, other questions?
So if you wanted to add into there in on line 20, console log, you requested the following information from this location. What values? You would start using the string interpolation, you would open the curlies. Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted, so if you wanted to add variables, you can do that. You can also just say you requested, and then plus the response. I'm gonna say response.name because no, it's actually .data.name. Yeah. .data.name. And this will print out that I requested Charmander. Oops, I keep pressing that. Sorry, guys. There we go. I just needed to add a space. Awesome.
A quick question. So everything that we're doing right now has nothing to do with front end side. This is just all happening underneath the.
No, this is, so the JavaScript is technically the front end. So we are making requests. We're not showing anything. We're not putting anything into HTML elements, but we are pulling the data.
Okay.
Is the async await returning the promise? So that's why you don't need the .then?
Yes, exactly. So this lets us await the promise. Or await the promise resolution. And you can't use this await keyword unless the function is set to be async. But yeah, that's why we don't need to do the .then, is because we are awaiting. So this is just a different syntax. You might find this a little easier if you want to kind of make multiple calls and use the data from one response into another. Yeah.
Okay. I've definitely seen code where they put the .then with await, async await. Is there a reason why they would, or is that just purely just semantics?
I think it's just semantics. It's just like at that point you're mixing different syntaxes, but I don't think it would. It might cause some issues if like you miss something somewhere because of the different syntaxes mixing, but yeah, if it works, it works.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Just since the asynchronous and the promise based, get requests, you can have things on different times. on like the assignment for today or yesterday, whenever it was, you have essentially you do like multiple GET requests from one or more APIs, depending how complex you want to get. In those situations, is it better to do like a GET that pulls all the information locally and then searches it locally? Or is it more time sensitive to have like multiple asynchronous requests? And then if you were to do that, can you use promises in a way to ensure the information is there when you need it? Like exactly, you have like one GET request here, but it may not fulfill at the same time that the second function executes. Does that make sense?
I think so. So the question about whether you should be calling it in the beginning and then pulling all your data like locally and doing searches and stuff on it, that'll depend on the nature of the data. If the data is being refreshed every 10 seconds or new things are being added to it, you might need to keep making the calls. But if you just need the data pulled in once or maybe on page load and that's it, and you can just use that data and it won't be stale, then you can just use it as it is. Yeah. Yazid?
The Axios GET, you said that it take few milliseconds for us to get our promise back, right? So why are we putting the await or await or whatever in front of it again?
It's because each line of code executes faster than this being like having to go out, find the server and then come back to you. Like think of it as like location wise. Maybe this Pokemon server is in I don't know, in Washington or something like that. And I'm here in Chicago, so it has to literally go from here to Washington and then come back. Versus if these lines of code are running in succession, these will happen so much faster than this can come back. Also, the nature of Axios, it returns a promise, so you won't be able to actually use it in your code until this gets resolved, until we get a response. So you won't, yeah. So pretty much all the code under your call might not be used or usable, because if I want to print out my response and I don't have it yet, then it's gonna get.
That's not how we were using our code from the beginning. Like we run through each line in order, right? That's not how we used to do it.
For which one, sorry?
I'm talking about every single code that we have been written since the beginning of the course. We have to follow each line, right? That's how we read the code. That's how the computer reads the code, right? So I'm not understanding the purpose of putting that await line 19. If we know that line 19 will run before line 20.
So line 19 is going to execute before line 20, and we have to wait. So what will happen if I remove the await? So it's just gonna call and then try to use the response. You get an error. Because our response when we tried to print it out was undefined. So that is why we have to await. So the asynchronous part is that if I called get Pokemon 4 and get Pokemon 17, these will happen asynchronously. I don't know which one will come back first. It's possible that the first one will come back first, but not necessarily. Yeah, so the first one did come back first. But
can you switch those around? Oh,
huh?
sorry. I was just gonna say, can you switch them around to see?
Yeah. Yeah, see that is a little bit of a weird, because they're happening at the same time, I was able to print out the name here. So I printed out the name for one of them and then printed out the name for the other. And then because I was waiting for this came back at a different time. So the two functions were happening at the same time and they're both printing to the console. So the reason why we have to await is you're only awaiting inside this function, but the function itself is happening asynchronously. Yazid, did I answer your question? I don't really think I did.
Sure. I will get with you during break. I still don't understand. So, but I will get with you during break.
Right after, okay, good, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ben.
Yeah, I just when you get back the object,
Mhm.
and you're looking for something in that file, what's the best way to look through that? Because it looks crazy.
Yeah, if the API has good documentation, you'd be able to find out what it's going to send from there. But honestly, if you're just exploring, the best thing is to just make the call and then console log the response and kind of look through it like we did here. It's not a fun exercise, but a lot of times that's how you have to do it. Yeah, just kind of
Would you
look.
Would you use a for loop then to display all things?
Yeah, you could definitely, like for each element inside data. Yeah.
On that Pokemon API website, below the character,
Uh-huh.
so if you scroll down, you can see the raw JSON values. That might help.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. And it's all open so you can see. Michael? I think you're muted.
So we're saving a file inside of a variable. Is it saving it as a class, a dictionary? How are we saving it? What is that?
It's
that
an
we're
object.
saving?
So in JavaScript, pretty much everything is an object. So the JSON data is just getting saved into an object, and we're able to access things by just doing dot and then the name of the next thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then would we use a try block in here to, if it comes back with nothing, or what would we use?
Yeah, so this is where you can use try catch. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Kayla.
Could you re-explain what ID is doing?
Yeah, so this one just came from a question of, would we be able to append a variable that we have to the URL? So let's say we have a page, like on an HTML page, we have an input and we're taking in an ID, and after they click the button, it calls get Pokemon with that ID that the user put in. So we were just seeing if we would be able to send in a variable and use that to drive the type of data that we're wanting to get. So here the ID is just getting a Pokemon with that ID. So it's just being able to use it as a parameter pretty much. So this would be the same as me putting 17 versus sending it in as an ID and displaying the ID here. So it's like, yeah, it's just adding to that string.
Okay.
Jacob.
I was just wondering if you could go back to the index HTML For some reason, whenever I added both of them, it's like not using both sources for the script. Or does the order matter? So if you toss like,
Yes, the order matters a lot because it has to load Axios first, and that will be like having the knowledge of that will then allow us to use it in index.js. So yeah, the order matters.
okay.
Thank you guys, great questions today. Kayla, did you still have a question or?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Okay, other questions? Oops. Okay. One sec. All right. Now we're back. So one thing that was in the lesson for today that we'll go more into later on is making our own promises. You don't really need to worry about that. If you have questions about it, please come to me and ask. But we'll be going over it a little more in depth later on in a few weeks. Okay, so for this, we got our data. Cool. What do we do with it now? Let's try to actually display it on our HTML page, and I will be asking you guys for help. So please feel free to shout out code or whatever you wanna see done. Okay, I can just start with a simple H1 tag. I'm gonna call it Pokemon demo or Pokemon API. Yeah, Michael.
I just had a quick question for best practice. Is it best practice to put your script in the head or at the bottom?
To put what? Sorry.
The script.
The script.
Your 3, 4. Is it best to put it at the head or at the bottom?
So I want to put it at the head because I want all of my like my entire website to have access to it. Like I want it to start from the beginning. I want it to yeah, I want to have access to it before the page loads pretty much, because maybe I want to load in data in the background or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure of best practices. It might be better for me to put it down there, but we will see. Actually, no, because I'm going to create a JavaScript function, and I don't think I'd have access to it before the script is called. I could be wrong on that. We'll get back to that. Okay. Our page is going to look very ugly today because I'm not going to do any CSS. But okay. What do we want to see?
Pokemon picture.
Pokemon picture, okay. How about we trigger our request with a button? You guys want to help me with that?
And a prompt. I want to put in the name of the Pokemon.
Okay. Can we do that with the API? If I put oh yeah, it did. I forgot that we put ditto early. Okay, ignore me. Okay, so let's get Pokemon, and let's display an image. So we're gonna have an image tag. I haven't done this before, so I'm kind of winging it right now. So if you guys want to help me out. That would be great. So making an image tag to fill in the Pokemon. And what else? I can say this is, I can give this a class name. Is this the proper way to, no, it's ID, right?
You can
Give it an ID and a source and a alt.
Okay, so if I want to access this image through the JavaScript, what do I need to give it first?
ID.
Okay.
So, I thought that the image tag is just one. Why do we have two here?
Oh, that's my bad. Does it need a closing like this? I
Yes.
think so. Yeah, I haven't used images in a while. Okay, so I'm just gonna say Pokemon image. And I'm not gonna put a source in there. Hopefully that doesn't break anything. Okay, cool, no errors. Okay, so I want, when this button is clicked, to insert the image source into this image, and then I would be able to see it. So what do I have to add for this button? Oops.
And on click, run this function.
Okay, so on click equals, and then I'm just gonna call it get Pokemon. And it's a function, so I have to put the parentheses. And our get Pokemon function right now, I'm gonna close this out, takes in an ID. So we can actually just send in the ID straight from here right now. Okay, so let me delete these ones or comment them out. So that means this function should only get called when I click the button, in theory. So let's see what happens here. I click the button. Nice. So we got the information. Okay. Let's try to find our sprite. Where is our Pokemon information? So
It's in the other. So
Oh.
sprites other.
I forgot that I'm making another call. So I'm gonna actually copy this. Just so I can delete these and still keep that one as an example. Okay. Console.log response, because I forgot what it will return. So let's check that, get Pokemon. And now, where did you say it was? So
I'm gonna put it in the comments. I think that's the right way to get the photo.
Data.sprites official artwork. Okay, let's check. So data sprites.
It's under
I'm not seeing
all those are images, but there's other. If you go down to other, you got bigger pictures there. I thought were better.
Yeah,
that is actually very good. Yeah, let's see what this link does. Or can I have to copy it. Hold on. I think this is better if I put it on. There we go. This one, right? Let's look at it to see if we like it. This is a good picture.
How did you move that to the bottom?
Where is it? Up here, the three dots. There's where you want to dock the.
Completely ignored those buttons. I'm dumb.
No, yeah, this is helpful. When I'm debugging, I usually like it on the right side, but to see this kind of information, it's easier when it's full screen, or like full width. Okay, so let's grab our image URL. So image URL equals, I'm gonna grab, so it's gonna be response dot sprites dot other, and then artificial artwork, or sorry, official artwork. I'm not sure if we need the square brackets. Do we need them? Or
I wasn't doing Axios yesterday. I was just doing a fetch, and I had to use a square brackets on the official artwork, not on the front end default. So
Okay.
the way I did it was just the dot front end default after the official artwork brackets.
okay,
That was the only way. I couldn't use it like another dot for the official artwork for whatever reason.
okay. Let's try to print this URL out and see what we get. Okay. I keep these Zoom controls are driving me crazy. Okay, there we go. Get Pokemon. Cannot read property other. Yeah, so I think that's. We'll try this. I'm not sure if this will work.
Need the,
Oh, I think because of
the
the.
data dot sprites, not just you'll need response dot data.
Oh, thank you. Data dot sprites. And then I'll then keep this for now. I think if it does need this, it might be because of these characters, like the slash. Okay, so now if I click this, okay, awesome. So we got our artwork. Let's see this.
And Zainab, while we're on this, can you explain the correct path in which we're taking through the API to get exactly where we want it to be? To where it was like,
For here?
yeah, what exactly is that? Sorry.
No, that's okay. So this is pretty much the path through the nested object that you receive back. So our response, when we look at our response, we have like a lot of nested data. So most of our actual data is going to be in data. So it's going to be response.data. And then whatever is the next thing that you want to grab. So we wanted sprites. So we did response.data.sprites. And within sprites, there's these, but there's also some other stuff. So we went into other, and then official artwork was the next one, and then front default. So yeah, that was the succession of events.
Awesome, thank you.
So yeah, this one works like this. Let me try with this.
Zainab, well, you're in the
because
middle
of the
that
item.
What is it?
Well, you're in the middle of that
I've seen that.
construction effort. Does the IDE have the ability to see that structure? So if you do the IntelliSense completion, will that work there?
I don't think so, unless there's some extension that I don't know about. But right now it doesn't have any sense of this information, which is why I have to kind of go back and forth and play around with the data.
I thought it did. When you typed data there, I thought it was, when Chris had you type data, I thought I was seeing an offer of.
No, wait, dot data, it does dot, but it's giving like a lot of different words. Like log is not part of data, and I don't think, at least.
I think it's because you already had data written above it, so it's just suggesting what it already
I
recognized.
think so, yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't have actual IntelliSense, so yeah, to predict. Yazid, did you have a question?
No, I was saying that what you wrote down won't work because of the hyphen.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to test out. So with the underscore, it works as one word, but when there's a hyphen or a tag, whatever you call it, you have to put it in this form. Oops, there we go. And this is just the same form as in Python when you're trying to access elements within a dictionary. Yeah, this so you can do either one, but this one is required. Like you can't just do the dot because it's not technically one word because of the dash. Which is good to know because when you're developing your API, now you know to do use underscores when you can with this stuff.
I think where it really helped me is if you look at the formatting of the JSON, if you have like JSON format or whatever, you can start identifying where the list begins and then where the dictionary starts. So you can see like which was a key value, which is a key, which is a value, and then whether you need to refer to like a list position or not.
Yeah, that is pretty good. Like in abilities here, you see that it's an array. So it's 3. And it's an array that has objects within it. And so if you want to access an ability, you would have to say abilities at the index, whatever the index is. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Okay, so now when I do get Pokemon, the URL is not defined. What did I do wrong, guys?
I think you fix it. You just have to run it again. So push the button again. You should be fine.
Okay. I thought I fixed it.
Don't you have to delete the line 36?
Oh, thank you. I added a bug. Okay, thanks. Yeah, there we go. So now we have access to the URL. Okay. What do we do now? What's next?
Is it time to actually push it back to the HTML?
Yeah, because we should be able to take that source link and throw it into the image.
Exactly. So I'm gonna call this image folder. I don't know. Okay. So what do I type here?
Is this that HTML inner text or something or other?
Yeah. So if I wanna,
where are you gonna put it is the question. Where do you want to put
first step is going to be, we want to put it into this image right here that we created.
So you can select query that ID.
Okay, so oops, document dot get element by ID, and our ID is going to be Pokemon image. And then I'm going to just make sure that I got what I needed to get. So console log, image holder. And this should print out an actual element. Okay, there we go. So now we have an image with the ID Pokemon images, or image, sorry. Okay, so what do I do now with the image holder?
Assign inner HTML.
And what's the syntax for that? Is it
Actually, I haven't done it with an image tag itself, but yeah, just dot inner HTML equals.
inner? Is HTML all capital or?
Yes, it's all
capital. Inner HTML equals what?
And then, like I said, I haven't done it with an image tag before. Usually I just attached it to a div, but just a quote of the URL, or you could use, in this case, where do you assign the URL, image URL, basically.
Okay. And how does it know to go to source?
Say again.
How does it know to assign that URL to the source attribute? So JS image add source.
So you could just do like an image and then the source, and then they use the data sprites other.
Exactly, dot source, dot src.
Okay, so image, we can grab that image and then we can actually access these through just the dot. Okay, that's good. So
So dot src first.
yeah, dot src equals our image URL. Okay. I think that's all we need to do. Look at that. That's awesome. Is anyone excited? Am I the only one? Woohoo.
That's pretty cool.
Can Now- you go now how do we- over that again? How do we do the input?
The input, we'll get to that. Someone asked another question. Hold on.
Yeah, I was just asking if you could just go back how
Mhm.
you added the image.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
So we'll start over here. We have our button, which calls the get Pokemon function. And then we have an empty image tag here. So an image tag that only has an ID, but it is currently empty. Like, I mean, it has no source, so it won't display anything. So when our button gets clicked, we are calling our API, grabbing a certain Pokemon, which we sent in the ID 17, but later on we'll want to do something else. And then we grabbed our image URL from that Pokemon data, and then we grabbed our image. So we did a document.getElement by ID, and we put the image ID here. And then we set the source for that image tag to the image URL that we grabbed from the API response. So that held, so the image URL was this, this is how we accessed it. So we grabbed the response data and drilled through to find that URL that we needed. And then we set it to the source of that image. So this is one way of doing it, where you have an image tag that's already there. What if I just had an empty div? I know, Chris, you just said this is how you did it. So if I have an empty div, and let's say we have, let's just say we want one picture, but this could be extended to having multiple pictures. So I'm gonna give this an ID. Images. Okay. So this would be to insert into an image. Let's try a different one. Let's try our div is going to equal to document dot get element by ID. And then I'm going to send in I think it was just images. Yeah. And what do we do now?
Could you not just use like .inner HTML equals and then create a new div with an image in it?
Yeah. So this like div dot inner HTML.
Well, no, like after the get element by ID
Here. Oh, okay. Dot.
.inner HTML.
Yeah. So this is going to be the same as me taking the div and then saying dot inner HTML. So yeah,
I see.
This allows you to chain the.
I'm sorry.
No. This is good. It's great to see like both ways of doing it. So dot inner HTML equals.
So this is where you put in your like your string.
Mm-hmm.
So put in a quote.
Okay.
And I think to make it easier to read, maybe go push enter to go to the next line. And then maybe a tab in to like where it's documents.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can start like make a div tag here.
Okay. So.
Well, since it's already in a div, we can probably just make an image tag.
Mm-hmm. So
and then inside it source equals. And then that would be for this one right here, the image URL.
And then
We would
let's
have to put that in double quotes, I believe, for the HTML.
for
Oh, yeah, so I'm sorry. So right here, you could use
Yeah.
the $.
So
Inside
here,
the double.
yeah.
Mhm.
and then $sign. So we need the quotes because it's gonna expect a string. So here we can use the $sign to just put this variable in here,
Right.
which contains our image URL. Okay, so
And then,
uh-huh.
I mean, I think it's normal to use like the alternate, like, so Pokemon image. If you wanted to do that
For what?
after the source. So if the image doesn't render, for like, people that are blind, you have an alternate image that says Pokemon image.
Mhm. How do we set the alternate?
So just alt after that, and then parenthesis or equals double quote Pokemon image. Yeah, just like that.
Perfect. Okay.
And
This
I
is-
think since we already gave it let's see, document there. Yeah. I'm not sure if we need since we're doing it this way, we don't need the div equals.
Okay,
So when we click the button, we need to make an on-click button. So when if we search, we can do, it'll do that as well. But that should
this should
work,
work.
I believe.
I think so too. Let's see. So get Pokemon, and there we go. It was added to the div, and if we inspect our elements, we'll see that here is our div. So we can actually see it before. So div just had an ID, it was empty, and then I clicked on this, and now the div has an image. So this is a good way if you have like a list of URLs and you want to kind of loop through them and add a bunch of images to a div. This is a pretty good way of doing it. Okay, we don't have too much time, but to do the input, we would probably need some sort of form. And I think input, I actually forget the syntax of these, but usually you would want a form to grab input and then have your button be a submit button. And on click, it'll do this. A lot of times, because it's a submit button, you will have to put at the top of the function, what was it? It was something that prevents defaults. I don't remember what goes before the dot. Is it window or maybe?
Could you not just put it in an input without doing a form so it doesn't do that?
Let's try that out. Maybe. Yeah, you could, because then the input will just hold the information and then you can access the information through the document, through the DOM, being able to, like how we called here, we were able to get the element by ID. You can do something similar to grab whatever's inside the input, and then your get Pokemon might have to change in that case, like your function definition, because if you're not sending in the ID here and you're calculating it here, you'll have to do something like that. But yeah, I don't want to go too much over for class today. Questions?